What do I want from Ursula now? Why does she again, after 26 years, dominate my thoughts? I could say it's because I'm between plays. Actors between plays are like ghosts looking for bodies to inhabit. During a play, you are somebody else as well as yourself. Often, this character becomes more definite and real to you than the quotidian self you face every morning in the mirror. You are possessed by your role. It is a form of possession you encourage to happen because it heightens ordinary life. It makes you feel larger than just yourself, and it does wonders for your stage performance. However, when the play is over, you are in limbo. With no one for you to inhabit, with no one to inhabit you, you may get depressed or go looking for action, any kind of action, to keep you from feeling ordinary again. Actors between plays are notorious trouble seekers. Acting addicts you to dramatic intensity, to a need for everyday life to have a shape. When you don't have a play to stimulate you and satisfy these requirements, you go out and stir up reality, trick your life into patterns of drama. Once, and not so long ago either, I met someone after playing Anne Whitefield to his Jack Tanner in a Shaw summer festival. When the marriage ended 6 months later, we both admitted that we had chosen to confuse each other with our stage roles because it had been a time in both our lives when we couldn't bear to go back to being just ourselves again. Of course, dwelling on Ursula, becoming infatuated with her memory, is a lot less destructive than marrying an elusive Superman. But why now? It interests me to puzzle it out while I mark time between roles. Why ever since I had the powerful dream about her have I become obsessed with recalling her, summoning back the way she was then, and the girl I was, the girl with all those feelings she did not know what to do with? Why have those old sins I avoided thinking about for years become my most alluring task? Is it because I am reaching the dangerous age, the traditional danger point that Ursula spoke of so warily, when people must either take some new risks or congeal? If so, what is the risk involved there? What is Ursula trying to teach me or make me do? And why should I feel so close to her, so strongly in touch with her, after all the years of recalling her with reluctance, discomfort, shame? God knows I don't want to be her, and yet in some way I do. She had an arrogance, a precipitance, a flair for improvisation I wish I had. It seems strange to me that I, not she, became the actress. Of course she was an actress to the very marrow of her bones, but she made her own life into her role, a dangerous proposition. It is as if I were preparing myself for 2 roles in the same play, 2 roles I couldn't possibly feel at one time. The role of the enchanted young girl with all those seething erotic and spiritual energies not yet channeled, and of the older woman who, thwarted by a too narrow existence, was nevertheless able to enchant. No, it's something more. It's as if, in allowing myself full recall of the power she had over the girl Justine, I'm trying to take on that power, to beam it back onto myself as an adult and as an actress until it infuses me and I become bright with it. Yesterday I rented a car and drove upstate to the village of Clove. There is throughway now, and the trip took a little more than 2 hours. It seemed wrong to get there so quickly. I felt I had cheated by returning to the past on a modern route. I got off at the Kingston exit and drove the old road for the 8-mile stretch into Clove. Things began to look less modern, and I felt better. There were still extensive tracts of farmland, many already ploughed and awaiting their crops. There were the same old stone houses along the road, some now bearing prominent New York historical landmark signs, but at least they hadn't been torn down or painted white. Then I had to remind myself that Ursula's house would no longer look as it had when I had last seen it. For Aunt Mona, several years after we had moved away from Clove, had written that a department store executive had bought the De Vane house and whitewashed the stones and put a cathedral ceiling with skylights above the old dark kitchen. Which meant, of course, tearing out the ancient upper room where the family of Chedithan De Vane had stored their grain and hung their meat, and where Ursula had hung the rope to make her little brother a swing. The department store executive must have heard some part of the De Vane story. You can't keep people from gossiping in a small rural places like this. Aunt Mona had written, but we real estate people sure kept mum about the whereabouts of that last awful episode. So it's 6 of one and a half dozen of the other whether he heard it from someone else and wanted to do away with that room, or that his wife took one look at the crummy kitchen and said she wouldn't so much as fry a piece of bacon till she had her cathedral ceiling. I know it's a shame to destroy the lines of an old historical home like that, but when you pay the price he paid, which is my commission alone was over $5,000, I guess you feel you have got the right to put your own convenience and comfort above some snobbish family's past that came to nothing but ruin and sorrow. The main street of Clove had changed much less than it might have in 26 years. There was the library itself, an old stone house, where I had spent several rainy afternoons reading about Huguenots in order to be closer to Ursula De Vane. There was the old movie theatre, now remodeled into offices shared by a lawyer and a veterinarian, where Ed, Christiana, and I had gone to the movies that one time at the end of the summer. Terwilliger's market was gone, a branch bank stood in its place. The post office, formerly a prefabricated structure with a tin roof, now made its respectable headquarters in a solid brick building. But just as in the old days, town was only a couple of blocks in a road leading to and from bigger places, and before and after those blocks, farmland still stretched on both sides. I drove on to Lucas Meadows. Nature and individuality have reasserted themselves there, and it is no longer the prairie of uniformity I remember. Trees have grown up around the houses. Different home owners have declared their personal tastes by adding wrought iron trellises, tool sheds and bird baths, or little plaster gnomes that sit cross-legged on the grass. The houses themselves no longer adhered to the old consecutive color scheme, and I had some trouble locating our old house. It is now a shiny coral pink. When I lived in Lucas Meadows, I dreaded being engulfed by sameness. Now, having escaped to return as an onlooker in a rental car, I missed its neatness. I missed perversely a certain purity expressed in all those bandbox trim houses and lawns seeking to blend themselves into an anonymous little enclave of upscale democracy. I counted only 2 lamps in all of the picture windows I passed, but would I, at 14, have felt less threatened by this new, cheerful heterogeneity of houses, every color of the rainbow, and trellises and gnomes? Then on to Old Clove Road. Farmland still, but a new element in the landscape that wasn't there before. Mobile homes. It had seemed longer, the twisting, hilly road, when I traveled it on my bike. Some important trees are gone. Others have grown up in different spots, and the light falls differently. Even the contours of the land are altered in places. I am up on the Christiana's place before it seems possible. Well, they have certainly endured. Evidences of prosperity everywhere. 2 new horse barns down in the field below the house. An elaborate system of fences cordoning off different groups of horses. New paint and a new roof on the main house. Another ranch-type frame house across the road where Turk's paddock used to be. A sign as large as a movie screen in the front yard of this house reads, Christiana Thoroughbred Farm. I can see a small group of men gathered around a van from which a horse is being unloaded down by one of the new barns in the field. They are too far away for me to tell whether there is anyone I know among them. And if there were, what would I say? If I were to park my car and walk down to them and introduce myself as Justin Stokes, the adult version of the girl who frequented this road quite a lot during one summer in the 50s, how could they possibly be glad to see me? How could they be anything but resentful and embarrassed, considering the reminders I would bring with me? I go on, down the hill, around the curves, across the little wooden bridge. I am beginning to think this stretch is uncannily as it was, except it is too early for leaves on the trees. But then I come to the hay wagon road, which has a chain across it and a no trespassing sign hanging from the chain, and I see that the road front part of the pine forest that led to Ursula's pond has been cut away to make room for a long tan mobile home with brown trim. A family is very much in evidence. Several small children playing in the dirt yard beneath a clothesline, and a young overweight woman watching them sullenly as she sits slumped on the steps of the trailer. And so on around that final curve, and oh God, there it is. I pull into the driveway and sit in the car with the ignition still on and gaze on the inglorious sight, and old rough stones, mere lumps beneath the whitewash that has been painted over the entire house, and the incongruous cathedral ceiling with its skylights rising out of the old part of the house, that first simple farm cottage built in the late 1600s, and the final badge of betrayal, the for sale by Century 21 sign jammed onto the derelict lawn.